Hi, I'm Kristen,
And I'm Candace,
and welcome to the Path Building Podcast.
where we are going to sit here and walk you through the client life cycle and how you can use that life cycle to set your business up for success.
On today's episode, we are going to be focusing in on the first part of our client life cycle, and that is our sales portion, our new lead sales. And we are going to be going through and we're going to be identifying our ideal customer, having some good conversation around good fit and bad fit, knowing our numbers. So, Candace, what is the client life cycle?
The client life cycle is going to be where our clients are going whenever they start working with us. So we start with sales. This is going to be bringing on a new client that's working with us. And when we're talking about the property management industry, the life cycle is typically client signs the agreement and then they onboard. We begin managing their property. That sometimes comes with a make-ready marketing. We get a resident in the property through our leasing process. That resident moves in. They're there through their renewals and their delinquencies and their work orders. They move out and we're either relisting the property or we're offboarding that owner. So when we're thinking about the client life cycle, it's that circle that a client is going through during their time working with our company. And we like to have this perspective of the client life cycle because this is how we're knowing where on the journey we are and what we need to focus on to give them the best experience. Now, Kristen, you know the sales portion of the life cycle. So I'd love to get your opinion on why the sales part of the life cycle is so pivotal to the rest of that client journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So whenever we are entering into our sales process here, this portion of the life cycle, it's our first interaction with a potential customer. We don't know if they're a good fit for us, if we're a good fit for them. And so we really are in our sales process here, really kind of taking them through a journey of its own of are you going to be a good fit within the processes that we have? And are we going to be a good fit to help you reach the goals that you want with your property?
That makes complete sense. And I think when we're talking about goals, it's really important for us to understand one, what are the goals? What do we have capacity to have? But also, what's reasonable to expect for a business development manager or a property owner who's functioning or a company owner that's functioning as a business development manager? How many doors is reasonable for them to bring on? So, can you walk me through some of those metrics and what we want to look at whenever we're determining what is a reasonable amount of doors to expect?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that it's an unfortunate answer that it's going to vary from company to company. Because really, whenever we're looking at this goal, we have this idea or we hear from other people in the industry what they're doing, right? We see people that are bringing on 30, 50, 60, 100 doors a month, and we may be a company owner who's bringing on two. Where's the benchmark? Am I failing? Am I succeeding? Really, what am I doing here am I measuring up? And so I think that the bar at which we should measure ourselves is against the goals that we have set, right? So if our goal is that we are a 500 door company and we want to get to 1,000 doors in a 1 year period, that means that we need to bring on at least 500 doors,
Mhm.
right? And so the benchmark at which we should see, am I doing a good job at bringing on doors? Am I not? Is based on the goals that we have set and what is the growth trajectory for our company that we want to see. But the interesting thing that goes into, the rest of the client life cycle is we also want to make sure that we stay ahead of any property churn that we have. So if this goal, we're a 500 door company, we want to get to 1,000 doors in a year. Okay, easy math, that's 500 doors. But is it? No, because if we're churning, 5 doors a month, 10 doors a month, we now then need to add 120 extra doors on to make sure that we can stay ahead and end at that 1,000 door mark. So now our goal may be 650 doors in a year.
Mhm.
Now, again, that may sound unreasonable for some of us, but that's just an example of a goal. And so the way that we want to measure the benchmark of are we doing good? Are we not doing good? Is not measuring against what another company is doing. It's measuring against the goals that we have set.
Mhm. And I love that you brought up churn because I think churn is a big factor that we like to consider in the client life cycle and also in determining when do we need to sell more, when do we need to pull back on our sales, right? And then, of course, finding that ideal fit client.
Right.
And I really want us to talk about the ideal fit client a bit because I think ideal fit client is how we're building our client life cycle.
Right.
When we're building our onboarding process, we're building it for the owner we want to bring on. So if that is going to be a very high touch owner, that's going to be an accidental landlord, they're giving up their family home for management. That's going to look a lot different than your serial investor who has 20 properties within their portfolio. So can you walk me through the process of identifying that ideal client and then how we're tailoring our sales strategy to make sure that it fits that client?
Absolutely. So whenever we're looking at the ideal client here, there's a couple of things, right? And we want to maybe look at who are we currently managing for,
Mhm.
right? In our portfolio right now, are we managing more for accidental landlords? Are we managing more for investors? Or do we have specific scenarios, right? That we want to manage for. And really niching this down can be scary, right? Because whenever we're niching down, we're learning to say no to people. And we're saying no to the ones that will break all of our processes and yes to the ones that are going to just fit just like a glove into what it is we're doing. And that's going to lead to less issues. That's going to lead to less churn if from the beginning we can figure out who we're managing for and who we're not managing for.
Mhm.
And again, it's a scary thing because we are going to have to say no. But what we have seen is the companies that grow the fastest know who they're managing for. And what that allows us to do on the sales end is tailor all of our marketing, tailor all of our messaging around this is what we can do for you. These are the outcomes that we know that we can provide. And if you fit into this group of people, we're a great fit for you. And if you don't, maybe we could be a fit, but ultimately we'd be doing you a disservice if we started to manage for you and you don't fit into this because we can't guarantee outcomes for your specific scenario. And so we want to make sure there in that word that I've said a couple times, there's outcomes, right? And I think that as we're going through processes, it's outcomes that we want to see. So really, whenever we're looking at our ideal customer, it's what are the outcomes that we can deliver and who can we deliver those for? So as we really start to kind of niche that down, we can then say, okay, I know as a management company, I am really good at managing properties for professionals who have disposable income where they have moved out of a property. They don't want to sell it, they want to hold on to it, but they don't necessarily want to grow a large portfolio. They want to maybe have one or two investment properties. I know that those are the people that I can manage for. So then, if we know that, we can then take that and make sure that everything else builds upon this idea that we're working with busy professionals. We're working with people that aren't necessarily accidental landlords, aren't necessarily serious investors, but kind of fit in this spot where this is what they want to do. So we want to tailor all of our messaging and everything around this ideal client fit.
Absolutely. And I think it's very important when we're thinking about our ideal client, that's going to play a really stark role in our capacity, right?
Right.
Because our ideal client, if we are bringing them on one, that's going to have a much tighter qualification for our leads that we have coming in,
Mm-hmm.
right? If with for companies that we work with and they have a really well-defined ideal customer, that person is going to say no to typically a lot more customers
Yes.
than they're saying yes to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's changing one, the numbers, the sales goals that we have. We want to make sure that the people that we are signing agreements with fit that ideal customer because when they're going into this life cycle that we've built, if they are a bad fit customer, they're going to break the
Mm-hmm.
process, and our processes are really only as good as we implement them, right? So walk me through when we're looking at the leads that are incoming, setting those numbers, right? Because if we're weeding out those bad fit clients, which we should be in that sales cycle, and we are also pre-qualifying our leads, we're making sure that the timing lines up. How are we going to then set the metric for those goals based on the incoming leads that we have?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of times the easiest thing for people to say whenever they're in this area and they're ready for growth is, I just need more leads, right? I just need more leads. I need more coming in. But question is, do you, right? And so your question here around setting those numbers is we really want to make sure that we're tracking everything. We want to know how many leads are coming in, and we really want to start to differentiate between valid leads, invalid leads. And if we want to get even more granular, our sales qualified, our marketing qualified, we can really get in there. But just knowing how many valid and invalid leads we have is a very important start for us. Once we understand that, then we can look to see what are we closing, right? And so if we are looking at our valid leads as leads that are our ideal customer fit, they are within our service area, they are leads that are looking to make a move in the next 12 months, they fit into our checklist here of what it is exactly we're looking for. And we look at our valid leads. Well, now the question is, do we need more leads or do we just need to get better at closing, right? Those are the two options that we have here. The easiest one is to get better at closing, right?
Mhm.
Because if you're not very good at closing and you are just adding in more leads, you're not doing anything different. You're not doing anything better. You have the same result just with a larger quantity, right? So you're messing up more times than you're not. And so whenever we're setting these numbers, how we want to look at it is what is our current conversion rate right now? How many owners do we want to be working with within a year? And then we are going to do a simple math equation where we are going to divide our closing percentage as a decimal by the amount of new owners that we want to see, right? So if we have a 10% conversion rate and we want 100 new deals to come in, 100 new owners, well, then what? We need 1,000 leads.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. So we know we need 1,000 leads within a year. Are we getting 1,000 leads? I don't know, right? So we can then see, do we need more? But what happens if we doubled our closing rate and we were now at 20% conversion? That brings down drastically the number of leads that we need to get to that door growth goal. So it's really important that we are understanding these numbers, but the only way we can understand them, Candace, is by tracking them. And so having a really good CRM in place to make sure that you can track all these leads that are coming in is pivotal to be able to answer some of these questions, because the answer is not always more.
Mm-hmm.
More does not solve our problem. There may be a deeper issue going on that we need to make sure that we address 1st.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's also very relevant to look at the turn of the leads that come in, right? If we are getting to the point where we are closing 30 to 40% of our deals, but then we're losing 20% after they've signed the agreement and they're in that onboarding process because we're not setting expectations, we're not being clear during that sales process, then there's a process problem, not
Right.
necessarily a salesperson problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where a lot of people get caught up, is that they're convinced, oh, well, my salesperson's doing a really good job, but why are things breaking later? Well, maybe it's a problem with our PM team after they're bringing on that property,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe it's a problem with setting expectations,
Right.
right? And we're going to talk a lot more about that. But one thing that I love hearing you explain, and I would love for you to talk about a little bit, conversions during the sales process, and walking us through what is a micro conversion and how does that help us track where in our sales process we could possibly increase our conversion as a whole.
Absolutely. So our conversion rate globally, right, is what we're doing from a new lead to a closed deal, right? So we can look at that and let's just say that that's 30%. But what's happening in between a new lead and the deal closing, that's where the micro conversions come in. And so if we look at our sales process as a whole, so let's say that we have a new lead, we have an initial discovery phone call, and then we want to do a Zoom consultation with them. We want to do some form of a consultation. From the consultation, we're going to send the agreement and then we're going to close it. There's about 5 steps that happen in between a new lead and a closed deal. So really what we want to make sure that we can go through and we can track is, what percentage of our new leads are we taking to our initial phone call? And of those people we're taking to initial phone call, how many of them are we taking into a consultation? From the consultation, how many are going into an agreement? And once they have the agreement, how many are signed? There are opportunities within each section here of our sales cycle for breakdown, right? So we may be really, really good and our new lead follow-up is great and we're able to set a bunch of phone calls with people, but we're not setting the dated next step. So they're never making it to consultation. But the ones who do are closing, which may have us at maybe a 10% conversion rate, 12%. If we go in and we just focus in on that piece from that initial call to that consultation, and we get drastically better there, that's how we raise the conversion rate as a whole, is by going in and focusing on these small pieces of the sales process that then allow us as a whole to be able to get better. Because whenever we think about, I'm bad at sales or I'm bad at closing, you may be really good at closing, but not great at setting dated next steps, not great at the follow-up. There is something that is not working within the sales process as a whole. And to just say my salesperson's bad at closing or my salesperson's not good at sales. No, they're probably pretty good, but there's just that small section within the process that they are breaking down. And by focusing in on that, that's how we see growth as a whole.
Absolutely. And I mean, when we talk about people being bad at closing or failing in certain parts of the role as a BDM, a lot of the times we think about the personality type of the BDM.
Right.
BDMs are typically very creative. They're going to be very energized. They're going to be very motivated. Oftentimes they are going to be extroverts, right? And so those people are often the best people at sending follow-ups and having those consistent structures of getting the agreements out right whenever they said they were going to. And so one of the things you had said to me whenever you were training me as a salesperson was, if you break the promise of sending the agreement when you said you're going to send it, why would someone sign up with you, right? Why would someone sign up with you if you cannot have those consistent follow-ups? And so we have to tailor our processes around the personalities that are going to be our successful BDMs, which are oftentimes not the people that are going to get that paperwork done exactly when they're supposed to. And I'm very curious about your opinion whenever it comes to the micro conversions. And oftentimes where we see breaks in the process is going to
Hmm.
be between that on-site consultation and getting the agreement signed, right? There's
Hmm.
tends to be a pretty big conversion off from that point because in the beginning it's a higher conversion, but we are pre-qualifying leads,
Hmm.
right? So from that initial phone call to an on-site consultation, it is normal for that to drop off because half of those leads are not going to be
Right.
qualified to work with us.
Exactly.
But by the time we're at the property to signing the agreement, typically we have pre-qualified them well enough that this should
Hmm.
be a pretty ideal fit client. So, how can BDMs fix that conversion where they've gone to a property, but they have been unable to close that deal either because they can't get the agreement signed or there's additional questions?
Hmm.
What advice would you give to BDMs who have a steep drop off there?
Absolutely. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that we're understanding the timeline of the person whose property that we're going to, right? Whether we're going physically, whether we're doing it on Zoom, it doesn't matter how this happens. But we need to make sure that we understand the timeline that that person is looking for. Because once we have that timeline, that's going to trigger to us when we actually need to send the agreement.
Mhm.
Just because I went to the consultation today doesn't mean that I need to send the agreement today, right? If the person's not going to be ready for the next 2 months, they don't need an agreement right now. They may need an agreement in a month and a half, right?
Mhm.
So we want to make sure that the timing of the agreement is correct. We want to make sure that we are sending it out at the correct time. That's number one, according to the timeline of our person. The other thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that we understand any urgency that they have, right? So if we're talking to somebody and they're moving in 2 weeks, I need this agreement signed today. Otherwise, I can't get your property on the market as soon as you move out. This is going to increase your days on market. We want to make sure that we're understanding the motivations behind getting this property
Mhm.
or this agreement signed. Because when I'm with them at a consultation, I want to look them in the eyes and I want to really talk with this person about what are the next steps to reach your goal,
Mhm.
right? At this point that we're sitting in the agreement, it's not about me. It's not about the property management company. It is about the person that we're sitting down with and their goals and how getting this management agreement signed is the first step to getting them closer to their
Yeah.
goals. And if we are not necessarily using that language or not necessarily going in that urgency, we're kind of making it a little bit about us, right?
Mhm.
Like, I need the agreement signed, but it's not about me. It's not about my property management company. Again, it's about the person. So
Mhm.
flipping that mindset and making sure that we are tailoring everything there to our customer that we're working with and understanding that timeline and then driving that urgency, not falsely. We are not making things up. We are not saying, oh, signing your management agreement on the 30th is so much better than the first because it feeds my commission. No, right? We're making
Mhm.
sure that it's all centered around what is best for the customer. And whenever we're using that customer centric language in our process there, now it's a no brainer. Absolutely. They have to sign it because it's preventing them from reaching their goals.
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned, reaching that deadline, right? Okay, you need to sign it today because that's going to help me meet my goals. And whenever we have that perspective of we're signing a client because it helps our commission or because we have a certain number of doors we have to close, yes, it's absolutely valuable for BDMs to have
Yes.
goals. There should be goals, there should be metrics, there should be a way to measure. But if we are saying yes to everybody, you are setting everyone up for failure, right? We want to make sure that we have that defined
Right.
ideal client. And I keep circling back to this ideal client because I think it's so critical to understanding our client life cycle, to understanding our success as a business.
Right.
And when you see companies that are really, really struggling, oftentimes it's because they're saying yes to everything.
Yes.
Now, there may be two companies in the same market that their client life cycles are the exact opposite. One
Hmm.
may only handle companies with accidental landlords or lower cost investments or multifamily that are under,
Hmm.
let's say, 2,000 a month and
Right.
they're studios and one bedrooms, and that's their niche because maybe they're renting to student housing
Hmm.
and they are doing a great job there. And then this other company in the same market is only doing single family homes, 3 bedrooms or more, and neither of them should be taking properties that are ideal for the other person's
Right.
company. And there's no wrong way except for not having an ideal client. Saying yes to someone to everyone is the only wrong way to do it
Right.
because you set up your salesperson for failure. They're going to be really frustrated whenever the PM team is not able to meet the expectations that they set in the sales process,
Hmm.
or vice versa. The BDM set some unrealistic
Right.
expectations, and now the PM team's frustrated because they're not able to meet them. Just rounding out kind of the sales
Hmm.
conversation and us bringing in the right fit clients, where would you say that most companies can improve their processes on bringing in that ideal fit client and being aligned amongst their team from the sales and all the way through to the property management
Yeah,
team?
absolutely. I think that I think you said it there. Alignment is key here. The salesperson understanding who they're looking for and the PM team understanding who they're managing for. Because you're right, it's very easy. I know you've been a salesperson. I am a salesperson. We just are salespeople at the
Mhm.
core. Getting that yes is really exhilarating.
Yeah.
Like it is, it's great. We chase it, we love it because it's awesome, right? People are saying yes to us, we've won. However you view the sales, it's great. So it's
Mhm.
very easy to be kind of trapped in this mindset of like, oh, I just really want the deal. Like I
Mhm.
put so much work into this. I just want them to sign, even though I know that they're terrible. So it's really making sure that the salesperson understands what happens after they sign that deal. So if your
Mhm.
salesperson is just sitting on an island of only understanding sales but not understanding the operations, you are doing a detriment to your
Mhm.
company because if I don't understand what my PM has to go through when I sign a really crappy property, I'm going to keep signing crappy
Yeah,
properties.
absolutely.
I'm not going to care at all because I'm getting paid, the company is growing, and it's not my problem after I sign it. So having your sales and your ops separate, right, to the point that they don't ever have any meetings together, they're not understanding the implications of their actions. That's going to be really hard because you're going to have this constant battle back and forth between
Mhm.
sales and ops. The way that teams grow, and you've seen this as well, is when the sales is involved, right? And I'm not saying that your salesperson is leasing your properties. I'm not saying your salesperson is also your property manager. What I'm saying is they know where the properties are at. They understand the life cycle that a client has to go through, and they're able to deeply explain to a customer what happens when, whatever, right?
Mhm.
An eviction or this happens. Your salesperson understands the life cycle, and that alignment together then allows a smooth transition from sales into operations there.
Mhm.
And so, kind of shifting that just a little bit, Candace, I want to throw the question to you, right? Whenever we have this understanding and alignment across the board of who our ideal customers and what our client life cycle is, how does that affect our processes now?
Mhm.
Whenever we have our sales, we get them, how does it affect going into operations?
I mean, the big thing that we have to consider is, are we selling to the right fit person? And
Hmm.
that answer should be yes, right? We should
Hopefully.
be selling to the right fit client. If we are, then we can build all of our processes around that right fit client, right? Our communication to that client should be applicable to the language that they're going to receive best. If we are only working with investor clients, that we should not be sending them 20 emails in the first week of signing, right? Whereas if it's all accidental landlords, we're going to build a process that's very high touch, that's holding their hand. It's going to be a lot more gentle
Sure.
language. And when we're building these processes, we need to define that ideal fit client. And I'm going to ask you a question. I'm curious if our opinions will be the same on this. Oh, yeah, I'm throwing this
Wheel
at
is
you.
loaded, but yes, bring it on.
Oh, this is very important. This is contingent on the rest of our relationship, honestly.
Okay.
Who in the company should be the person to determine who our ideal fit client is?
I think that whoever the leader of that
Mhm.
company is should help to drive that decision with buy-in from the other members of the team. So whether that like leader of the company is the CEO, the owner, lead property manager, whatever that looks like, I think that it is the leadership team that defines who the ideal fit customer is.
Yeah, I agree. I do think it should be the leadership team. I think it's very important, especially there's a lot of property management companies that started and it was a team of 2 or 3, right?
Mhm.
And you have this leasing agent that's now your first ever property manager, and they were foundational to the company's growth.
Right.
I don't think it's like not reasonable to have that person's opinion
Mhm.
whenever we're determining that best fit client, because there's always a chance that that person does not have the personality alignment for the type of client
Right.
that the leadership team decides is ideal fit. And then they have to decide, okay, are we willing to part ways with this person who's been with our company for a really long time because they're not well suited for our ideal client, right?
Right.
And so that's where you get to the point of loyalty to employees, especially employees that were with you foundationally within the company, and also the company owners, that leadership team, to be able to have the growth and meet the goals long term that they want to.
Mhm.
If you are a company owner that does intend to eventually step out and hand the company for really direct oversight from one of those property managers that have been foundational in hiring in someone, you need that ideal fit client to align with that personality type and align with the way that it's going to be structured once they
Mhm.
step out. And that's where I see a lot of companies break, is because we have company owners who have the set ideal client, or they love their accidental landlords and they're very high touch, but then they bring on a property management team that are indirect. They don't want to have those soft conversations, right? And so they're not hiring for their ideal client. And so now we're breaking our processes. We're sitting here and our processes are breaking because our
Mm-hmm.
ideal client doesn't match the team that we've built around. And so your ideal client needs to be set by the leadership team, but it also needs to match the culture we're setting
Mm-hmm.
as well. And I think that's where we see a lot of companies break is their ideal client does not match their culture. They're
Yeah.
building an environment that is not attracting that ideal client, or it is attracting the ideal client, but their team is not prepared to
The
handle
buy-in's not there.
exactly. And so I think as that relates, there's a lot of work that needs to be done before we build our processes.
Mm-hmm.
We need to make sure that we have the right people in the right seats.
Oh,
We
yeah.
need to make sure that our culture is right and it fits the ideal client we want. And then we can build these really awesome processes
Mm-hmm.
that are going to attract the ideal client and make them happy during the life cycle. And now our salesperson can have all of this great information and build sales strategies that are going to attract that
Mm-hmm.
client.
Yeah.
So and I do think you have the right answer.
Thank
So
goodness.
incredible work.
So whenever I would like to get just like a little bit specific here,
Mhm,
if you don't mind. And so whenever we're looking kind of from transition from sales into our operations processes here, and if we are looking at, let's just go with the easiest, our accidental landlords here.
mhm,
What would be some like specific examples that we would be looking at process wide for us if we're working with accidental landlords? I know you mentioned some softer language, like
mhm.
what are some other things there that come to mind for you that are specific whenever we're building processes for accidental landlords?
Absolutely. So if you are building a company that is prepared for accidental landlords, one, your onboarding process needs to be a little bit slower. We are not just like rapid fire sending
Mm-hmm.
them a bunch of information expecting they're going to know. California, for example, you're going to have some withholdings that the owner may not be familiar with. So you need to make sure you're explaining to them there's going to be this withholding if you're living
Mm-hmm.
out of state and prepare them for some of these things that they may not be aware of had they not had investment properties before. I really like building into an accidental landlord company to on our onboarding call. Let's sit
Mm-hmm.
down and get them on the phone and gather information. Sometimes it's a little bit easier to figure out what work's needed, what work
Right.
the owner's doing whenever we build this out within our process early on. I
Mm-hmm.
really like for us to have something where we're handling owner source vendors and making sure that we're preparing for if they want their vendors to complete work at the property and having conversations of what if they do a bad job, right? So all of this I think should be built in early on in the process to
Mm-hmm.
ensure that when this owner is fully onboarded, our property management team has the information they need. The owner feels prepared for what's going to happen next.
Mm-hmm.
We have well-defined next steps, right? So next you're going to go through our make ready. We're going to begin listing your property as soon as it's ready. And that's all communicated very early. So there's no surprises. The
Mm-hmm.
worst thing you can do for an accidental landlord is surprise them, right?
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts in that, especially having sold to a lot of accidental landlords?
Mm-hmm.
How do you think we tee that up in the sales process to make sure that they're prepared for the onboarding?
Exactly what you just said. Their expectations, I think, are key whenever we're going through this, that they know what is going to happen next. And I believe that true as like a universal truth, no matter who you are selling to, whether it's accidental or investors, in between, wherever anyone lands, whatever comes next is the salesperson's responsibility to prepare the owner for,
Mhm,
prepare them for what they can expect. If they're not going to hear from anybody for 3 months, that's fine. If that's their process,
mhm,
but we need to make sure that that work is there, because I think the worst thing that we can do is have a salesperson who is selling to our ideal customer, and then there's
mhm.
the bait and switch, right? Because our salespeople are usually very, very responsive, right? They're very, very high touch for the most part, right? Unless they're not, which is also okay. But we want to make sure that the sales process and the operations process mirror each other there, so that we are setting the expectations and then we're fulfilling on those expectations within our operations.
Absolutely. And we've talked to multiple clients about the way that their sales team is approaching the sales process. They should not be answering calls at 10 p.m. on a Saturday
Never,
if the property
ever.
management team is not doing it. Now, if you expect your property managers to answer calls at 10 p.m. on a Saturday, sure, let your BDM do it. But if your BDM is constantly available, they're setting the expectation that the property management team will
Exactly.
be as well.
Exactly. And so then I think that that feeds into the accidental versus the landlord,
Mhm,
right? Of setting just those right expectations. But to tie it back there, I think that the answer is it is a salesperson's responsibility to set the expectations for what comes next throughout the entire process, and
mhm,
really laying that out to make sure that that owner is on the same page moving forward. Because where I've seen a lot of times, like onboarding specifically break down is when the salesperson does not take that responsibility to prepare the owner. And so then there's this handoff,
Mhm.
and the owner just goes into limbo, and they don't know what is supposed to come next. They don't know what the next step is for them, which then obviously is frustration. They're taking this really, really big step of, I'm trusting you with my largest asset. And then you didn't prep me that I was going to get ghosted for the next
Mhm.
2 weeks. So that onboarding was going to take 3 weeks to happen,
Yeah.
or I'm just not prepared. So then I'm giving you a 1-star review because you took my money and now, like, my reserves, whatever, right? And I haven't heard from you. Now I'm frustrated. And that could have all been solved by one conversation.
Yeah, and I mean, imagine you get a job and you go through these interviews and you sit down and they offer you a position and you sign the agreement of work and then you don't hear from them. You don't know your start date, you don't know what's next, you don't know what office you're working in.
I think you've been scammed.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I just signed away my life for nothing,
Yeah.
right? You have to, as a landlord,
Mhm.
you've signed this agreement. Oftentimes, companies are requiring an additional deposit and owner
Right.
contribution at the time of signing. So you've signed an agreement, you've given all of your personal information, you've given money. You want to hear back. You want to know what the next steps are, and ultimately, the product that our salesperson is selling is our property manager, right?
100%.
It is the property management team, yes.
And your processes.
Yeah, but your processes and your property manager, that is what your salesperson is selling. And so if those aren't dialed in, then we have to think, are we ready for a salesperson?
Yeah.
Do we have the product that's worth selling? If you are making your beautiful ceramic cups, but every time you put water in it, it poured out from the bottom, maybe you're not ready to sell that cup, right? And so we need to make sure our product is ready for the
Mhm.
right salesperson. Because if you have the best salesperson in the world, but your team can't keep the people they bring on, you're going to have a salesperson putting in their notice pretty quickly, right?
And that is exactly why we are here,
Yeah.
is to solve that problem, exactly, because we have seen that happen time and time again,
Mhm.
where growth is super sexy. It's super attractive. Like, I want to grow. I want to make money. I want to, like, be this, whatever the goal is. But there's prep work that goes into that, right?
Mhm.
Like, it is just unreasonable for you to wake up one day and absolutely have no training and then go out and run an ultra marathon, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's ridiculous. You wouldn't do that, or maybe even a 5K or wherever, like, right? It's just ridiculous. You wouldn't go and do that without any training. And growth needs to be taken seriously, just like everything else, because going into it and just saying,
Mhm.
oh, we're going to grow or we're going to double, it breaks everything. And one
Mhm.
of my favorite kind of metaphors here to look at is a foundation of a property, right? I'm from Texas. We have really, really hard dirt there, right? So every property has foundation problems, but they won't fix it until there's like a 3-inch difference, right? But once you have to raise up the foundation, it breaks the pipes, it breaks the cabinets in the kitchen, it breaks almost everything, to where then if you are doing a significant raise on your foundation, you have to fix everything else in the house. And growth is exactly that. Whenever we are growing, things break. Things will break in your company, and you have to be prepared for, if we're going to onboard double the amount of doors that we are now, what has to change in our onboarding process?
Mhm.
If we are going to be moving in double the amount of tenants that we have ever moved in before, what is going to have to change? If we're now screening 5 times the number of applications than we ever have, something has to change. Your processes need to break in order to grow. So growth has to come with a very serious mindset shift, that what we're doing today is not going to be the thing that is going to support us whenever we grow by 20%, grow by 50%, grow by 100%. And really making sure that that stays in the forefront of your mind, I think, is key to
Mhm.
actually growing.
Absolutely. I think this is a great way for us to kind of segue into what this path building podcast is going to be. I think this is a very good kind of breakdown of that first part of that client life cycle. But as you mentioned, things break in your processes.
All the time.
And and I mean, half the time when we're talking to companies, they have this process that's working so well, but one day it just stopped working and they don't know why. It's because they grew.
Right.
They built a process for 50 doors that cannot handle 75 or 100, right? And so whenever we're meeting with any new client, we do what we call a process audit. A
Mhm.
process audit is looking at one specific process and figuring out every single piece of that process that could break with scalability. When we talk to owners during the process audits, the question we often ask is this sustainable when your company doubles? What about triples?
Mhm.
Can you do this alone? Can you, Mr. Owner, be the only person that's entering in the property information into your PM software when you have 1,000 doors coming in a month, right?
Probably not.
Exactly. Okay, 1,000 doors a month is a little excessive anyway. Honestly, whatever company that is, good on you. Good on
Yes,
you.
we would love to work with you.
Yeah, please give us a call. But when we look at scalability and the ability for process to grow and mold, we have to determine what's going to break, not just today, but in a year, in two
Mhm.
years, because we want to build processes that can scale long term and that are sustainable for our clients, so that whenever they're challenged with the big problem that is growth, right, they're able to accept the changes
Mhm.
and move forward and have a team that's prepared for change. We need to have
Yeah.
that mindset for change and being prepared that scalability is going to break our processes. And we are ready. We have the spackle. We're here to fix it, right? And so we do this by looking process by process and where we have the possibility of breaking. So we're
Mhm.
going to journey through our client lifecycle together from sales all the way to offboarding an owner and figure out, okay, where do we have the processes that break and give some input on what we've seen be successful for company owners and where we've seen their processes break. Is there anything I'm missing in our client lifecycle and our goal here with the Path Building podcast?
I don't think so. I think that you got it. And we're excited to be on this journey together with you
Mhm.
guys. We hope that you learned something along the way because we are here to give you everything that we have.
We're sitting here learning all this information so we can share it with you.
Yes. So tune into our next episode where we are going to be diving in a little bit more specifically on this onboarding and really making sure that we have our onboarding process really dialed in.
And our capacity to bring
Ooh,
on
that's
more
the big one.
doors. So avoiding that fall through of signing a door and losing them as soon as the ink's dried, right?
Exactly. So go ahead and click on over to our next episode and we will see you there.
Talk to you soon.